All right, so I'm going to start the process of trying to teach how to scan an object into 3D, okay? And what I've been doing is basically, trial and error. What's the worst case scenario? I wanted to do the worst. That's how I work. If you figure out the worst case scenario, everything else is easy, okay? The worst case scenario is thin material. Okay, that's really tough, really tough. So if you can get that part down, good to go. But there's one impossible thing with this workflow is shiny stuff. Okay, if it has any kind of shiny to it, you're not going to be able to do it. If it has highlights to it, like if this flower right here was wet, you would never be able to do it. If the bottle had any kind of reflections whatsoever to it, as it's spinning, you'll see right in this area, it's got a little shine, and you'll see at the very lid of it where there's this masking tape on the inside of this lid, it's shiny. So what's going to happen here is anything that shines basically takes and reflects the environment, and it's always changing based upon its rotation. So shiny stuff is absolutely no go. Thin can be done. So I've figured out thin. Thin's easy compared to shiny stuff. So this first part is just what you'll need. Okay, what you'll need, and this could change anywhere you look at it as far as like what equipment that you're using. It could change. You could use a Lazy Susan, you can use a tripod like I did. It doesn't really matter what you use to spin the object. How the object looks while it spins is the important part. Okay? It has to have a thing called vector points. So the first thing I got is just a tripod, okay? And the tripod has the ability to rotate. I'm using a Manfrotto tripod head. Okay, Manfrotto. And let's see if I can get that. Will my 4K camera pick up that? There we go. Slowly, maybe? There we go. That's what I'm using for this. So that's because I'm in a studio right now that I'm borrowing for the demonstration. You do not need a studio. Okay? This is just the fact that it's here that I'm using it. So if you literally used a Lazy Susan, you could. For a backdrop, you're going to need something with kind of a texture to it and not the color of the object. So if I went to use a red background, it would not work, right? Because the red carnation or pinkish red carnation wouldn't stick out far enough. I can't use white. White in depth maps, we're going to be eventually making these into depth maps, but white is not a good color in a depth map, so don't use white. If the object has white on it, let's say the flower had white tips, as long as I was using not a white background, it's okay. You're still going to have problematic things happen with white. Can be done, but you have to work on your lighting in order for it to work. So there's a thing called white balance, and you could throw off the white balance if that was the case, just to get the whites to be a little orangey, and it'll work. There's a lot to this, by the way. All right, so long story short, you're going to need a way to rotate the model. Okay? 2, you're going to need a background of some nature. The background's going to be rather big. So if you look, I got it going from here to there, because when you go to like take pictures of this, you're going to be on a tripod just like this tripod right here. And you're going to be adjusting this up and down and what angle. This is a cell phone attachment. You get them on Amazon. And this could look different too. This whole tripod thingy could look different. How you build this, how you hold your camera could look different. But for me, this works out because what I have to do is try to keep the legs out of the shot. Okay, so you have to have some kind of way of like taking your cell phone and putting it out there. So when you're taking overhead shots, you're not seeing the feet of the tripod. So all I have there is another tripod. It has a weight, counterweight. I use solder, high tech, right? Weighs a lot. It weighs about the same as the phone too. And then I attached it to a tripod. How you do that, it's up to you. And yep, so now I can adjust this camera. I can adjust it so it goes that, or like that. So the key is to have something to hold either your digital SLR or your cell phone. I wanted to kind of keep it down to cell phone level for people that were poor with this demonstration. So I've been using my cell phone just to try to, like what is possible with a cell phone. So most of the scans I've been doing is with cell phone. I use a Samsung S20, but I'm pretty sure any cell phone will work as long as it's like, at least 4 to 8 megapixels, which is fine. Nice. So it makes sense so far, hopefully. This is just the hardware end of things. And again, I'm borrowing this studio right now to do this. I can do this at home using far lesser technology, but I will tell you that it helps to have the tripods. It does. So you'll see that this thing is painted with all kinds of crazy stuff. Why is that? Well, again, in the photo, it needs key vectors. It uses colors, shapes, it uses key identification points as it's rotating. So that means the background I could have some color back here on the background, but it's better to have like black lines on the background, to be honest with you. So I'll take a Sharpie marker and draw some stuff up here. This is a brand new background that I wanted to kind of share with you, but if it had like lettering, if this was a box with like lettering on it, keep the lettering. Absolutely keep the lettering. Those are perfect. But the color here must not be on the background. So if you plan on doing, I don't know, a tree, you wouldn't be able to use this background. You would have to use a purple background or something like that. So all I did here was I colored it, and then I sprayed it with a dulling spray. So I put all the stickers down first and then sprayed dulling spray over the top of it. Matte finish is all I did. And on the underside of it has key vector points also. So it looks like this on both sides. So that means when I have my camera set super high and it's taking a shot like this, it can see the key identification points at the bottom. Cool. All of this, when it does scan into the software, you pretty much delete anyway. The only thing I wanted was the flower. If I could find a vase that was shorter, that would have been better. And then later I found a thing called floral blocks, which is this green block that you could shove a flower in, and those work really good if you can do it all in one day, because they die. And the wilting of the flower will affect the overall scan. So you have to get, if it's an organic, like a flower, you have to do it. You have to like stick it in the block, and you have to take all your pictures all at once within an hour, maybe. And that way, the wilting of the flower doesn't change the overall composition. Cool. All right, so that's step one. What do you need? You need for this is some equipment, and probably several trips to the hardware store, and several trips to Amazon just to get the right stuff to like hold your cell phone up, to be able to get all the angles down and everything else. The cardboard box is probably by far the easiest. The round thing does not have to be round. It could be any shape as long as it has a center point. And the object must be affixed to it. So I can't move that, and I can't rotate this flower. I use hot melt glue to glue the object to this, and when I'm done with it, I could just use rubbering alcohol to release it. Sweet. So now we'll kind of look at the next step. What do you have to have as far as like software on your camera? All right, let's go over phone and what you'll need there. So the software I use, and the phone I'm using is a Samsung S20. The only reason I'm using this phone is because my phone. Like, I didn't go out and buy a special phone for this. I would highly recommend a very good phone camera, but the reason for a cell phone camera is this: there's no such thing as depth of field. Okay? So the only way to use a digital SLR camera for this is you have to have a lens that goes all the way up to f/36. And f/36 is usually in the macro range, 100 millimeter. We're talking about a lens that's probably about $500 to $800. With a standard phone like this, there is no f-stops. There's fake ones, okay? There's fake depth of field, but really a cell phone or any kind of composite type camera doesn't have a lens, so it doesn't have a really good lens and lots of glass, so we don't have to worry about depth of field. So if I went to the pro mode of this, for example, I still have ISO, shutter speed, manual focus, but there's no f-stops. All right, and there's some applications on your phone that do have f-stops. I think it's OpenShot or something like that. ProShot has it, and it's a very fake aperture at that point. So what I'm looking for is not a perfectly exposed photo either, because the whites in the photo cannot be white. So I'll leave this in the background as far as the white is concerned, just to show you. So you can see right now that's clearly not white, right? It's kind of a tone to it. So what I would recommend is taking your camera, exposing the crap out of it. Hopefully I don't got anything there. So turn up your brightness on your phone. Boom. Okay. Now you're really seeing what is what. Okay, that white right there, what we have to do is get that not white. So they have a thing called white balance. And you can go like this, and you can see now it's blue, now it's orange, now it's really ugly blue, but not white, right? So good. So it doesn't matter what white balance it is because the software doesn't care about that. So turn it to an off-white balance to your scene. It helps to have manual focus. So when I go to manual focus, I can go like this, and it has some green outlines show up. And the green outlines show me that that's in focus. Now what's nice about that is if I have an object that's really tall, like this flower, and I'm overhead of it, like that. Let's see, I'm gonna be able to show this. And I start going like this, I see those green outlines around this object and the flower, and that's telling me I have a good depth of field. Okay? This has to be in focus, the flower has to be in focus. Everything in this shot has to be in focus. Good, good. And that's really hard with a digital SLR, unless you got a good lens. The speed does not matter. Okay, what I want to do is eliminate whites again. So I usually underexpose it. Look at the whites, the stickers in the scene, say those are too white, so I'm going to eliminate that. And the last version that you really have to worry about is ISO. So if you can get a digital SLR or a camera on your cell phone to go to 50 ISO, you're good to go. You cannot have any noise whatsoever, because noise constitutes as a vector. And that means you'll end up matching these magical points of ISO that doesn't exist. ISO is a noise that occurs inside images. And I think I got this thing called EV on my phone. And EV is just the ability to overexpose it. The other advantage of using a cell phone is I do not have to have any kind of flash photography whatsoever for this, but you do need either a type of studio lighting with, you can see these, okay? So these are my overhead lights, and those unfortunately are LED. And I say unfortunately because LED is notorious for casting shadows. You can't have any shadows in your scene. They are not bad because they are highly diffused, but in most cases you want to use fluorescent bulbs for this. Fluorescent bulbs do not cast shadows very easily. LED bad. So you need an environment that has very universal lighting, kind of like this studio. You can see when I'm over here and kind of zooming in on this flower, it's lit, but in the shadows, in the shadowed areas right here, like in there, you don't see much of a shadow. And if you do, you have enough information there, just writing on the verge of it. Let's see. So you can see the darker parts in here. So there's enough information still in this shot that I can pull and use software like Lightroom. All right. So now that I shared with you, the software and what you're kind of looking for as far as the camera is concerned. All right. So now we're going to look at, like if you're getting a digital SLR, or maybe you already have a digital SLR. To do this, you will need the following. You'll need a lens that goes to f/36 or f/40. Okay. You notice this lens right here goes out to f/51 when it's extended. Okay, when it's extended though. So this lens goes all the way up to 64. The lens pretty good. The bad thing about all digital SLRs though, it has a travel on the lens. I think Canon and Nikon had this problem. So if I'm taking a picture of an overhead object, you see how the weight of the lens, okay, pulls this just like that. Now you might have a lens when you first get it, it doesn't have that, but I guarantee after you use it for almost a week, it's going to have this problem where it's going to start doing the travel thing. So it cannot have that because the zoom has to be in the same zoom location. If I'm using a zoom of 50% zoom, it has to have zoom of 50% throughout the entire shot. It helps. If the zoom changes, the aspect changes, and that's not good at all. All lenses have this bubble feature because of the dome of the glass. I forget what it's called, but because it zooms and it has that bubble, all the vector points get screwed up. So I would highly recommend maybe a lens that doesn't have the ability to travel. This one has a nice tight feature where it doesn't travel. It is not the typical Nikon lens though. It's the knockoff. It's a Tokians. It's a pretty good lens for it. But there's even one better. It's the Nikon 100mm one, and or 110mm. And I'll put a link below. It doesn't have the ability to do this at all. Okay, so you're looking at an expensive, super expensive setup to do this if you're going to digital SLR route. It's almost cheaper to do it via a nice cell phone than it is with the digital SLR.
All right, so as far as software is concerned, you're going to need several software packets in order to pull this off. Top three, Lightroom, Blender, top four, sorry, Metashape, and Zbrush. Okay. So we'll go over the first one, Lightroom. Why do you need this software? This software right here allows you to do multiple changes across many, many, many images all at once. So for example, if I went to go take this shot and I go into develop mode and I change something like, let's say this flower right here had some white in it, and this is before I started using cardboard in the background, but I could expose it. Okay, I can also change the temperature. To eliminate some of the whites. I can go into the sharpening and sharpen the crap out of it. I can get rid of most of the noise in it. But the most important feature is this, lens correction. So this software allows you to do a lens correction based upon the chromatic aberration is what I was talking about earlier. This right here allows you to correct that and fix the distortion that happens with cameras. So if I was to disable this, it's real slight here. Okay. So, but on a grader, you can see how that is affecting the shot. So it really helps to have that set so it's corrected. So now I can copy that, and I can copy everything, and then I can paste it across many shots. As long as auto sync is on, I can paste it. Boom. Now all these shots have the same change. Absolutely. And I could do that across 500 shots if I wanted to. So that's why Lightroom is required. I would almost say required for this. There is a freeware version of Lightroom. I forget the name of it, but as long as it has those features, let's say you were looking for an alternative route to Lightroom, it just has to have those features, especially the lens correction version. It also would help if it has the white value, so you can change the white value of things. And see a histogram. That way you know that, see how like this one has whites in the scene, but there are no lights. And the darkest darks aren't even there. But if I went to go shadows, or underexpose it, and even then oh yeah, there it is. So there's these little blue things right here that show up, and there's not enough information for the software to use here, and there's not enough information for the software to use here, because those are dead pixels. So as long as it has that capability, the other one where it fixes the lens correction, and it has a few features here, and be able to copy paste it across 500 odd photos, then it's a good software. Alright, so the next piece of software you're going to be using is a program called Metashape. Okay? Metashape is by far one of the more expensive applications in the workflow. It is a required software, in my humble opinion. There's free versions of this as variations go, but I couldn't find one that could accept as many shots as was necessary to do things like flowers or organics, and Metashape did do that. So for the price, it's worth it. Okay, so there's a pro version and a standard version. Right now you're looking at the standard version. So far I've been able to do everything with the standard version. I have kind of looked at the pro version as far as a free trial is concerned. It is a lot faster though. So what I would recommend is you have to have a computer that you don't want to use ever, because it's always going to be doing this workflow. Okay, so it's going to have to be like an i7 computer. It's going to be off in the corner being a potato the entire time. And when you import all your stuff in, it's very simple. Again, this video is not about, you know, like what you have to do per step, but all the software and all the equipment you would need in order to pull it off. So standard version of Metashape required. I will, since I got this open, kind of talk about a couple things. You notice these shots right here, I'll use a white background, but I had shapes in it. I had like this noise in the background, and that did work. You're also seeing that the background is grayish, not completely white, and that worked too. So if you had some noise back there, that's fine. It really worked good with skulls and skeletons, because in this case I had elements of those in here, whites and off-whites, so I had to counteract that with noise in the background. So it's not a definitive thing what I talk about as far as like, hey, it has to be this level white or this level gray. Depending upon what you're taking a picture of, you're going to have to do a little bit of a trial and error until you get it down. Okay, so cool. And you can see the head vector points here on the underside of the carriage of that, and then also on the top of it I had also. The difference between this setup and the setup I showed you in the studio also is at home I have the ability to just have the platform move and it takes a picture automatically. So I programmed the Nikon camera to be able to take a shot, move a stepper motor, and then take another shot. Alright, so let's go on to the next piece of software that I would recommend. Alright, the next piece of software is absolutely free, but the high skill window for it makes it so that you might not be able to do this right away. So you're going to need to use Blender. Now you can use another program called 3D Coat instead of Blender. But Blender will give you the ability to do just about everything and grow with you a little bit longer, and it's free. Okay, so the high skill window in both programs, you should probably just learn Blender. So the reason for Blender is when you go to scan in your stuff, okay, you're going to scan it in, and even if you nail everything, you nail the lighting, you nail the everything, you're still going to get these. Okay, they're holes in the mesh. Boom, 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 boom. See them? Here's a hole. So in order to fix a hole, you're going to have to able to like go into the mesh, highlight this area, and there's several tools in a few programs, but this one you could just go like this and X, collapse faces. And it's ugly geometry, but what's nice about Blender is I can immediately go into sculpting mode, and it has a feature in it called Dynatop. And in order to see that area that's ugly, I can just click on wireframe. I can see it, and now I can go back to my tool under Dynatop, and it says, well, what resolution do you want? I'm just going to use 5 for right now, but it fixes the geometry in this area with this brush. It's called Simplify. So Simplify with Dynatop, boom, fixes it. And depending on how much mesh you want to put in this area, you can just make this number larger, and boom. Okay, easy as that. And you're going to have a million holes, by the way, unless you really, really nailed everything. That's where trial and error comes in, and it has a lot to do with your environment that you're shooting in, a lot of your vector points, a lot of everything. So that's what I've been doing, is using Blender. That's the software I highly recommend for the workflow. And to learn it, again, it's like a whole course in itself just to get used to the software. I've been using Blender since, I don't know, like I was probably 20, and I'm 47 now. I'm pretty familiar with all the aspects of it, so I might be able to show you some key points, but at least you know what software to start aiming towards and how much it's going to cost. All right, let's cover the other one. All right, so the next piece of software I highly recommend if you're going to do this as a thing would be Zbrush. And I'll kind of go over why Zbrush over Blender. Blender is an amazing program, and I'm pretty sure you can get by with just about everything in Blender. There was a couple of ones I did all in Blender. Now, if you want to get some of the higher detail things out of the way, let's say I was to have a model that was fully scanned, and then I wanted to add some super amounts of detail into it. Okay, so this is one of the skulls I scanned, and then I decided, well, you know what? Based on the scan, I didn't have information like slash brush. Let's see here. So there's brushes in here that go really, really, really fine, and allow you to kind of, sink into the mesh. Okay, Blender also has that. Blender has the ability to make a Dynamesh. Here has a Dynamesh. Now the difference between Blender and Zbrush, I can make the resolution in Zbrush so high that it would totally devastate Blender. It can't handle super high amounts of polygons. So Zbrush can. That's the difference between Zbrush and Blender. Blender, amazing program, but if you really want to get into some of the super high detail stuff, you got to get ZBrush. And then what will happen is after you get all done, you can then do a decimation master, which will lower the amount of polys that it first started out at, so it's 3D ready, 3D print ready. And you can export that as an STL file right out of ZBrush. You're still going to kind of use Blender to reorient it though, but since Blender's free, that's okay. It's the only thing you're going to be using this software for is a super high detail. So if you're not really into the super high detail, you don't care about that stuff, you would save your money, don't get it. It's a huge skill level involved when it comes down to ZBrush also. It will take you quite a while to get to the point where you can master it. Okay? Several classes of ZBrush would be required just to get the navigation. It's not everybody's cup of tea. So, there we go. Alright, so the last piece of software you're going to be needing is whatever software is coming with your 3D printer. So I've been using Chittabox because I've got an Elegoo Saturn, and I don't mind this software. It's pretty good. It doesn't really accept too much as far as detail is concerned, because let's say I got a model that's really dense. It's slow. It is. But it's okay. I don't mind it. So the version that comes with your 3D printer, if you got a Saturn Elegoo, is perfectly okay. The only difference between it and the Pro allows you to change the diameter of this. See how this is touching the model? I can make that super small, and that means I can get super amounts of detail on a super small model, and it'd be alright as far as like removing it from the print bed. So this thing's going to be attached to a print bed, and if these are too wide on a really small model, we're talking like maybe 20 millimeters to 40 millimeters, it's really hard to remove them without removing the detail on the model. So that's the difference between the Pro and the free. This is the free version. The thing I have is I can choose from light, medium, and heavy. Okay? But in the Pro version, I can choose light, and I can also change the diameter of these. There's other software, however, that you might want to explore called Prusa Slicer that does the very same thing. You can import your model in, and it's free, and you can export it out. Then, once it's changed, you can bring it back into Chittabox. It's an extra step if you want to save yourself some money from Chittabox Pro. Again, is it required to have Chittabox Pro? No. But if you wanted to get down to 20 to 40 millimeters in detail, then it is. Alright, so that's all the software that you would need in order to pull off this workflow. So I will talk about the last thing you're going to need in the workflow, and that's computers. Okay, so in order to run ZBrush, Blender, Metashape, you're going to need something like an i7 computer. At least you're going to need at least 16 gigs RAM, at least, and I wouldn't recommend anything other than that. Chittabox, it runs on a really kind of slow computer, and you got to have patience with it, but you can have quite quite a low-powered computer and still run Chittabox just fine. Lightroom, 8 gigs of RAM's fine. So a separate computer that runs Lightroom, Zbrush, and Blender, and then Metashape on a different computer. And the reason for that is Metashape will hog up resources that will not allow you to run any other program other than Metashape. The Zbrush and Blender computer, I would recommend a really good graphics card, and the Metashape one, a pretty high-end GPU CPU combination. All right, so that's everything. That's software. That's all the equipment that I've been using, as far as like borrowed from here, there, and everywhere. I do have the same sort of setup at home, but not really. I don't have the fancy tripods. I don't have any of the other stuff, and I've been using my cell phone at home. Works out just fine. I did happen to buy ZBrush when it was incredibly low price, and it's free upgrades for life. So I was lucky enough to get it for like $50. Now it's a $700 program, but since it was free upgrades for life, doesn't matter. Lightroom Classic I've owned forever as far as the subscription is concerned, and Blender's free. So software is covered, and nearly not as fast computers at home, but I deal with it.